Welcome everyone. I'm here today with Cristian Atria, which is the founder of NView Medical. I'm very happy to have you on board, Cristian, with this podcast. Welcome.
Happy to be here, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Christian, today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into your entrepreneurship journey. You have a lot of things that are extremely valuable to share. I'm very when we had this first discussion together, and you tell me about like the way and the influence of the lean startup within your entrepreneurship journey within your medical device company. I was very happy that we are able to share that with other people and our listeners. So today, I just want to share that what we're going to do is that we're going to discuss about the entrepreneurship stories behind the creation of NView Medical. We as well going to dive into your background and the influence on working with, I would say, larger corporate companies within the space. And we're going to dive into after the main topic of this interview is really like the iterative development process that you deployed within your company. So, Christian, just can you share like a quick feedback about like your background, where you come from, and how did you ended up to create NView Medical?
Yeah, well, I have a technical background. So I have a degree in electrical engineering. And so I started working in medical devices early on in my career. I worked for GE Healthcare for many years. So I did most of my career with them, going up the ranks. Ended up being general manager for a small business they had acquired here in the US. And that's how I came to the US from Europe. Um, and then at the end of my career with them, I was more in a business management role. And at a certain point, I decided to NView Medical. We'll dig into that. But that's kind of my background. And then what I'm doing now with NView is basically a startup in medical imaging. We've developed a novel scanner that is helping surgeons actually see what they're doing in 3D during the surgery. And we're starting in scoliosis as our beachhead application. So yeah, happy to share my experience with the development process, whether the development process that we're using in the big companies or what we're using here at NVMe.
Amazing. So first, let's start with from the beginning. So you had experience with GL scale, like working with these big corporates. I want to try to understand like how did that impact your life and the development processes and the different processes that you set up within NView. Is that like the type of experience that you would recommend other founders to go and to try, like trying to work for a corporate before founding their own company? What's your take on that?
But I think my recommendation for anyone who wants to start a company or become an entrepreneur is uh, definitely not to start from scratch. But I don't think necessarily needs to be in the industry or with a large corporation. I mean, you can find valuable experiences in academia, smaller companies. My recommendation would be to start from something. So do have some experience. Try to understand the basics of business. You know how technology solves problems for customers, and I think you can do that whether you're in big companies or not. Just make the most out of your experience and then apply what you've learned when you do your startup.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, that's there's different thinking that we can hear always. Like when you create a startup, you need to be agile, and we're going to focus on um, um, the lean startup processes. And sometimes there are like texts that people say that when they start working on a corporate, you can lose that agility that you kind of need to when you start your startup. But at the same time, when you go working with a corporate, you develop like very good processes, especially when you are in an environment which is extremely regulated, such as like medical device, and those quality manufacturing process are needed to basically go further. So that's what you take on that.
Well, what the lean startup teaches us, right, is that a startup is not a small company,
Yeah.
but is an idea trying to find what company needs to be. So both things are true. I think eventually you have to become a larger company with processes, but in the process of doing that, you have to use a method that is a little bit more lean,
Yeah.
more dynamic, that will help you achieve your goals. And if you're in a large company, what I learned is, of course, is a company that every 3 years, 5 years, they do a product, so they already know the product market fit. They already know how to sell. So the process always works. So you can afford to have a traditional development process,
Mm.
uh, and then in a startup you have to be more lean and more iterative. And obviously, for me, coming from the industry and starting a startup, it was a little bit of a learning process to discover that you actually had to do things maybe a little bit differently. But eventually, you will get there, and then eventually you will also behave like a larger company.
Amazing. So let's dive into like the process. So you, I would say, like finish like to work with. I mean, your experience to work with corporates. How did you get the idea? How did you start to say like this is an idea which is worth like creating a company? Yeah. Can you walk through like the different steps that you went through?
Yeah. So I basically borrowed the problem. If you start a company, you start with a problem in mind that you're trying to solve. So I borrowed the problem from the problem we were trying to solve while I was at GE. And then after GE, I also worked for a European company called Fiagon that was coming in the US, and I was their commercial leader. And the problem they were trying to solve was this problem of inaccurate surgeries and how to make this process efficient for the surgeon. And so I kind of borrowed that problem and then found a different way. I was enough aware of the technologies that existed. So I saw an opportunity to use the technologies differently and solve the problem. So it was pretty much borrowing the problem and trying to solve the same problem I was trying to solve when I was at GE and at Fiagon.
But in a different way with a different solution that basically ended up to become like a company, a company.
Yeah, I think everything it really comes from curiosity. So I
Yeah.
was doing a lot of more. I was working more on the business side, but I was always curious about technology, right? Because that was my background. So I was aware of the new algorithms that were coming on board and GPU computing, for example. So it felt like it was the right time to do things differently.
Mm.
So a little bit of hope and a little bit of, sometimes you would say, naivete, that things are going to be easy. And that's how kind of I jumped into this adventure of Enview Medical.
Wow. Did you? I never asked you. Did you found it your NVU Medical by yourself, or do you have like a co-founder? Or
Yeah, no, I started by myself. They always say that the entrepreneur life is a lonely life, so I would highly
yeah,
recommend everyone to have co-founders.
yeah.
But when I started, yeah, I started on my own.
Okay. So at which point did you tell yourself that it was like the right time, the right step that you needed? I mean, that your project, your technology, like the solution that you envision was ready to basically get some funding. And how was that process basically?
So yeah. I mean, Enview was not the first idea I had, but it's the first one that I thought it was good enough to jump in. So I would definitely say, don't jump in on the first one. I mean, then you look back to your first ideas and you say, oh, well, those were not necessarily good ideas, right? So um, yeah, be a little bit patient. And to me, I felt strong enough about this idea that I applied for some grants with the National Science Foundation. So that's a kind of federal agencies here in the US. And then at a certain point, the grant was allowed, and that kind of forced me to say, okay, what do I want to do? Like, do I really do this grant?
Yeah.
And then I decided to jump in when we got this grant. So there was a little bit of external validation for us to say yes. Other people believe this is good, so let's try and do it.
So you got that grant, you continue your developments, and after that, you start to go to talk with some business angel, VCs, to basically like accelerate the development. That's
Yeah, I mean, there is this idea of, if you're going to do a startup, you're going to raise money. So in order to be that startup, you have to be raising money, right? So
yeah,
um, That's kind of what we all believe. But in reality, I mean, there is different money at different stages of the company. And,
Mm,
we were really lucky. We applied for 2 grants, one with the NSF, one with the NIH, and we got the grant with the National Science Foundation, the NSF. And that really kind of allowed us to fund the development and the technology development, right? Because we started from an idea on a piece of paper.
mm,
But if I look back to my fundraising efforts, I would say that really it's important to understand the type of funding you're looking at the stage of the company. And if
mm.
anything, I would say we're too much focused on the fundraising, and we really need to be focused on the development of the idea, because it's really difficult to fund ideas. So we were lucky, as I said, to get those grants from the NSF, NIH. And then from there, they actually help you a lot, because they can give you a phase 1, then a phase 2. So when the idea is further developed, then I went to angels. I was able to, my first 100K, they were from angels. And then from there, we got a phase 2. And, the phase 2, you start talking about more serious money. And then at a certain point, we did a seed round and we got VC funding, and everything went well from there.
How many fundraising did you go through so far?
So we've done 2 seed rounds, and then
Yeah.
after that, I discovered the convertible note mechanism, which is a mix between traditional fundraising and debt. And I've used that, so that basically was also 2 rounds via convertible notes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so that managed to basically fund like the whole development of your product, because that right now, like the situation of the company is that you are basically commercializing like your product, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we were able to develop the whole product and actually go to market, and we haven't raised our Series A yet. So
Okay.
so that's a little bit not usual, I would say. It's we've done a lot with little, and I'm very proud of that. But yeah, I mean, with the lean method, actually, with the lean approach, you're actually able to do a lot. And if you're careful, you don't have to spend crazy amount of money. I mean, we've raised close to $10 million to kind of get where we are. But we are still doing our Series A, and I mean, we're selling into hospitals, and last month we announced that we have done more than 250 surgeries already. So this is definitely a product that is working and being commercialized. But as I said, we're still raising our Series A. We're still a young company, very small. We're a small team, less than 10 people. So we're definitely a lean startup.
Wow, so you mentioned me like several times like lean startup, and what was the impact of that knowledge basically on your company. So how did you get exposed to the lean startup? Was it like when you were fundraising, when talking with VCs, or is what like from a previous company? How did I impact your life?
So I got exposed to the lean startup when I started, and there is a lot of organizations that help you. So I mentioned the grants and these federal entities that help you. They also want to educate you on how to do startups. So you go through education programs with them. But here we're based in Salt Lake City, Utah. The state of Utah also helped us, and there are some free trainings. I went through that, and that's how I got exposed to the lean startup. It really resonated well with me, because I knew a little bit about software and the software development process, the iterative process, and to me it made a lot of sense. So when I look back to my days at GE, I mean, it's probably the right process for a large company, but it just felt that we couldn't follow that process when trying to build something with less budget. So it really felt like it was the right approach, and I became an advocate for it, and a champion for it, and then I implemented that at NVU.
Can you share like some quick stories about like how did that lean startup process, how you've been implementing that within your company? I don't know, into markets targeting or anything.
Yeah, to me, I see 2 areas where we really implemented that very well. I think one is um, showing the customer the product early on and gather feedback from customers. So very early on, we did, hundreds of interviews to different customers. And because of that, you end up really exploring different segments, different profiles of customers. And that really helps you uh, finding the right product market fit, which is, of course, one of the key things that a startup has to discover, right? And
Mm.
the other one is in the development process itself, the iterative process of development. And those things go hand in hand in the sense that you have to develop things that you show to your customers. So you want to iterate based on their feedback. But really, this idea that you can talk about all these features and have large plans about your development. But if you don't iterate fast enough, then, unless you get things right and you're lucky enough to know everything, you're going to discover sooner or later that you have to adjust. So you better discover early and iterate fast so that you the wrong ideas get kind of sorted out quickly, and then you can very quickly move on to the right ideas and then build on that iterative process and evolve, basically make that idea evolve naturally towards what the customer wants.
So how does that work? Because I mean, it's lean startup is it's an amazing idea that allows you. I mean, process that allows you to really find your market and really find your ideal customer. But at the same time, like you are designing a product which is heavily regulated, which you need to make sure that you list the requirement, that you trace everything, that you test everything, that you have like the traceability, that you report everything to the compliance agency. Like how is that possible to be able to be agile enough, like to find your customer, that at the same time like making sure that you have everything set up for the compliance?
Right. I mean, obviously it's challenging, right? Because it's a little bit of a clash in between different worlds. I mean, if you look at the the FDA regulation talks about design inputs, design outputs, verification, validation, and the iterative process talks about all those things and them over and over again. So the way we looked at this was there's also one clause of the QMS, or the quality system, and the FDA regulation that talks about design change.
Mm.
So our approach was, when you go for your 510K and you do your development with the FDA, of course, talk to the FDA and explain what you're doing, but develop a minimum viable product that has all these things done right, right? You have the requirements, you have the verification, you have the validation. Put that in the hands of the customer if you can. And of course, it's regulated, so you have to wait for the 510K or do pilots. And
Mm.
then use the design change process. So in the design change process, basically, we use that to maintain compliance. So do that in a compliant way, but use the design change process as a way to iterate into your product. And the
Mm.
design change process allows you to change requirements, redo verification, redo validation. So we basically have implemented a process here where we're able to do releases on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, and we're able to deploy that to the customer. But those are verified and validated releases. We just have a very efficient process. And of course, you have to rely on technology to help you, because you're going to do those design changes over and over again. And you cannot forget about things. So we use technology that helps us keep track of the features that we're developing. We have Kanbans and technology like that helps us kind of manage those quick releases.
Okay, but it seems to me that from what you're sharing, those change requests were not really related to, I mean, hardware, mechanical component within your product, but more like you fix those different hardware, mechanical component, and you really change the features through the software, right? Which allows you to increase like the turnaround time, right? That's
Yeah, I mean, that is, you look at our product and it looks like a product that is heavily hardware based. But then you look at our work, engineering hours, and amount of changes, and I would say the hardware is so much more stable at the end than the software. So
mm,
yes, it's absolutely true. I mean, we're iterating more on the software than we are on the hardware, and that was also a little bit the philosophy of the design. I mean, we
mm,
also created a hardware platform that was going to gather data, and then by design we were going to kind of have software manage everything. So obviously the product is also designed a little bit to allow this iterative process to work, because we're working mostly in software.
That sounds good. Is that like a process that you saw before, for example, like that you have previous experience when working with other companies before, or is that something that you just came out from the exposure of the lean startup and your previous experience?
Yeah, well, I saw the counterexample of that
Okay.
because when I was at GE, for example, we were developing a new imaging system, and of course, there is a hardware team and there is an electrical engineering team. So there's a new project, so everyone is doing their new boards on their new, mechanical elements. And from my perspective, was why do we have to develop all these new boards? I mean, the computers nowadays are powerful enough to do a lot of things. So why are we developing custom electronics? And when I decided to start Enview, I took the opposite approach of what I saw when we were at GE, where we were developing the least hardware possible, and we were doing the most software development possible.
Now, what does it take for a startup in the same field than you to implement like such processes in terms of resources, like software, people? Um, what's your
Resources.
recommendation for those type of companies that want to follow your advice here?
Yeah. So, well, from our perspective, I mean, we were pretty savvy when we started Enview on having quality systems and the regulations. So we basically were able to create a compliant process just based on our knowledge. And then
Hmm.
we were using generic tools, software tools, like project management tools that help us manage the software release and the requirements. And we, from the beginning, we took an approach to have a database for our requirements. So we can manage the history of the requirements, we can manage traceability automatically. Uh, so we found a tool that worked for us. We knew what compliance looked like, and therefore we ensured that the processes we were building were also compliant. But one piece of wisdom here maybe that we also developed our quality system in an iterative way, meaning we were not adopting a full quality system when we were not doing manufacturing. So of course we were not adopting a manufacturing quality system. We're just doing at the beginning, so, prototyping. So we had a very simple quality system, and then we made that quality system grow as the company grew. So we started doing service in the field, then we developed the service procedure. So we really stayed lean even in the development of the quality system.
Yeah, making sure that you don't implement like features, tool, processes which are not needed at the right time in the development process. And do you recommend like do you recommend like startups to seek for outside help? I would say like if in that or any recommendation that you may advise if they were to be in the same situation.
Right. I mean, before you look outside, I would recommend the startup team to look inside. I mean, you need to know
Mm,
yourself very well and understand, what are your skills, where are you strong at, and where do you need to find outside help. And if and you need to focus your energy where you are needed and where you are the strongest, right? So I would say, if I started from scratch, I would definitely look for help, and I don't want to recreate a quality system or development tools, right?
mm,
If you have enough experience and you feel like you can do things, maybe with Excel at the beginning, start with Excel before you go to a more evolved type of tool that will help you be compliant in the long run.
mm.
So everything depends on who you are, and I think in general it's super important for anyone doing startups to understand their own strengths, their own skills, and then the tools that they know, right? And then based on that, start working on the product as soon as possible, and then leverage your strength, and then look for help where you need help.
I completely agree. I even chatted with one of a consultant, medical device consultant, that was sharing like the fact that until you get like your science right, it's not the time to, I mean, invest as well, like on those quality processes and start to be lean. I want to discuss quickly about AI, and especially since, you know, like it's everywhere. We're seeing like so many companies that are trying to leverage AI on their product, their services to increase their value proposition. Um, you are in a position where I mean, your product is taking like images, health images, and did you think about like, or did you think, or do you currently like use AI to analyze those different images? What's your take on this topic?
So, I mean, we have been using AI in imaging forever, but maybe it was not called AI at the time. So, I mean, there's definitely new things like machine learning and convolutional neural networks, and that are amazing tools that we have available now that we didn't have available, 10, 15 years ago. And we're definitely leveraging that. For us, the utilization of AI came in two main areas. One area is in the image creation. So we create those 3D images. We use AI to create 3D images because we're not gathering all the data that the imaging system should have. So we use AI as a way to bring prior information, prior data, and merge that with the data we're gathering in surgery so that we can provide the best images we can. But an area more traditional utilization of AI that we have is once we had the first prototype and we put the prototype in the hands of the surgeon and they see they can get a 3D image, the reaction was great. I have a 3D image, but now what can I do with it? And it was actually complicated for them to interact with the 3D image because I need to see a specific view. But now, if you give me a full 3D image, I need to find that view. And that is like all of a sudden, a system that was supposed to simplify their work was making it more complicated. So we actually used AI to help the surgeon get the right view that they want at the time when they need it, and without asking them to browse through the whole image. So basically, choose the right slice, choose the right view for the surgeon. So we have, for example, AI identify the spine. So we do spine surgery, so it identifies the spine, and then it shows the exact view that the surgeon wants to see, or labels the vertebra so the surgeon can be oriented and can be operating on the right levels. So this is kind of our more traditional way to use AI.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's the so what's the situation of your company? Where are you going? What's your vision, the strategy? Like, what's the next steps for you in terms of growing your company?
So in pretty much in the lean model, right? Is the whole idea is find a beachhead and win in that beachhead. I mean, there was a class I did. It was called Nail It, then Scale It. So we just focused until now. We focused on nailing it in one beachhead segment, and that beachhead segment for us was scoliosis. So we really built, I would say, a wonderful product for scoliosis. If you're doing, standard scoliosis case and you use our technology, everything works perfectly. And we kind of nailed that application. So now we're looking at the next step, which is scaling that. And for us, scaling it means, reaching everyone that is doing scoliosis and having a sales force that is able to, push this application to all the users so everyone can benefit and all the patients can benefit of this technology and that's one axis of development. And then the other one for us is going to be to scale the applications themselves. So find other applications like AI, like spine, where AI can solve the problem and our imaging can solve the problem, and then bring the same type of solution to general spine or general orthopedics or trauma so that, we can bring benefit beyond the spine.
Mm. Sounds good. If anyone want to help and get involved, what's the best way to reach out to you? Website?
Send us an email. So it could be info@enviewmed.com, or something that specifically related to the things I manage, then feel free to send an email to christian.atria@enviewmed.com. And I'm sure, Jeremy, we can put my email there. For us, if you can help us on the scaling side, or on the product development, commercialization, all these areas are of interest for us.
Thank you so much, Cristian. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was a really pleasure to chat with you, and I hope to see you soon and to keep updated from your progress.
Thank you, Jeremy. Lovely conversation. I look forward to a next one.
Thank you, Cristian.